I think we are live. So, welcome everybody. This is the 8th of February 2023 delivery system sync and demo. We have some discussion points and a demo. Discussion point, Ruben, is yours.
So we have a plan for adding a metric to track environment locking. So as part of that, or to do that, we need to know where environments can be locked from. Two places that I know of is one is the chatops command and the other is the deployer pipeline. Does anyone know of any other ways? Like how do change requests, do SREs lock the environment?
I don't believe SREs lock environments, but both ChatOps and deployer uses the same mechanism. They write an attribute to a chef role on the chef server. So one theoretically could modify that role manually, or they could, I don't think we encourage this, but I think a merge request could also set that attribute as well. Last two items I mentioned are far less common. In fact, they're probably never used because we advertise our ChatOps command pretty heavily. So I'm not sure the best way to get a metric out of this unless we're reading our chef server for the value that we're getting for where we write the attribute. But that's probably where I would start for this type of task, just because it could be set in a few different locations. You're not going to be able to rely on ChatOps because you'd have to write that somewhere else and then have the metric reader read that value, and then deployer is going to, do this in a different way. So I don't know. I think unless you have ideas, I think the best bet is to call out to chef server asking for this value inside of the role to develop the metric from.
I always
So,
think,
the
sorry,
chef service is kind of the source of truth with this.
Yes.
Okay.
but that would be kind of like a pull method of getting the information. So like every 5 minutes you call. I was thinking that we could, incrementing the metric should not be a problem because both ChatOps and deployer should have access to delivery metrics. I think so. So they can both call delivery metrics API to increment or decrement the metric. So that shouldn't be a problem. And it'll be a push method. So like whenever someone runs the ChatOps command, it'll call the API.
I guess in that type of scenario, we'd have to figure out how to set the metric in a way where if it gets off sync for any reason, we would need to know how to get it back into sync such that it kind of represents the appropriate value that we want it to see. We have spoken in the past about changing how this lock mechanism works, and the reason why we've done this is because there was talks that chef was going to go away, but it never did, and that work never picked up. So because of that, we never worked on changing the mechanism for how this works either.
I think we are going to move to sync, no?
We'd still need some sort of chef server, even if we use sync. It would just be a sync server.
Okay. So one part that I missed. So if we go with the ChatOps way, we are having actually this push method, right? So as far as I understood, I mean, chef is the single source of truth. So in any case, the attribute is going to be set there. Which are the ways, again, Scarbeck, are we using to change that attribute? I missed it at the beginning.
Just ChatOps and deployer are the primary ones, but again, because this is just a chef role,
and deployer,
that's not stopping anyone from going into the role or going into chef server or opening up a merge request that modifies that same value. But like I said, those are far less common and probably never used anymore. When prior to us having the ChatOps command, it was common for us to go and modify chef server using the CLI. But those methods aren't used these days.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Ruben, did we get all the information requested?
Yeah, I was thinking we can maybe post a question to like Infrastructure Lounge to ask if any SREs still lock environments using the Chef CLI.
That's a good point.
Just to check.
That's a good point. Are you gonna do that? Take an action
Yeah,
from this?
I'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you. Jenny.
Yeah, speaking of locking environments, when we lock environments, it basically in the job it checks for the lock and then it gets errored out when trying to deploy, correct? So for our Ruby 3 rollout, we basically said, hey, the release manager should just cancel the previous job or the job that attempts to deploy in like each environment while waiting for the bake time of the last environment. But Alessio brought up a really good point. He's like, why don't we just lock the environment? Then it's just a nice coincidence that we're talking about locking the environments. Would this be like a better solution? But then also we need to contact what's it called, like SREs, SRE like on-call for that, or do we also like can we run that chatops command?
So in my opinion, locking environments is good if we want to pause the deployment prior to each stage, but that's not going to work when it comes to Kubernetes because Kubernetes does not check for a lock prior to it starting. So if I recall in our steps, we were going to deploy to one of our clusters, let it bake for a period of time, and then deploy to a second cluster, let it bake for a time, and so forth. Our mechanisms do not check for the locking mechanism in the Kubernetes environment or in the Kubernetes deployment system. So this will work if we want to stop it from going to staging, but then we want to unlock it to get past or get the staging environment started. But then we'd still need to cancel like prior to prefect, for example, because the job that checks whether or not environment is locked is in I think it's the prepare stage of the deploy pipeline. So it's only going to impact that entire pipeline that one time. It's not going to impact the individual downstream jobs that get called upon.
Right. So, so do you think it'll be an easier process for the change technician to cancel the jobs or versus like for the non-Kubernetes ones and just basically say, hey, let's lock the environments for the other ones. And when it comes to Kubernetes or basically anything in production would be canceling the jobs for production only. And all the other environment is a lock.
I think because we need to cancel jobs, I think it might just be easier to stick with that as the primary workflow, just to keep the amount of like comprehension of the steps a little simplistic, if that makes sense. Because then you're not messing with both chat ops and as well as determining which jobs to cancel. It's just a blanket, cancel this job at this point in time. It sounds easier to me, is kind of why I lean that direction.
Can it happen that if we cancel the job, something else coming after and starting again if we don't lock the environment?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
So we cancel the job and then there is a new package coming in for whatever reason. And this job is going to start again with a new package, with a new pipeline.
Yes.
But we are not going to have extra pipelines, right? Because we're going to
No.
pause auto deploys. Okay.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I was going to
Mhm.
add, I guess it'll partly depend on the release manager who needs to do
Mhm.
this stuff. So like what that person is comfortable with. Like for example, if it was me, I would have said that locking would be simpler because I'm familiar with that. So
Mhm.
it will change with which release manager has to do that stuff.
Yeah, essentially it just says, we want to deploy to one environment, basically bake for 2 hours. It's 2 hours per environment at this current stage. And
So like,
yeah,
yeah, at the start you
Uh,
could just lock all environments, then unlock staging canary, let it deploy there, then unlock production canary.
Since we are on this topic, actually,
Mhm.
that you brought up, Jenny, I want to add if you got all the answers you needed here, I would like to add also a
Yes.
discussion point from my side. So I saw that in the rollout plan, I was looking at it this morning, we have these 2 hours kind of baking time, one in staging canary, one in staging.
Mhm.
Is one were requested by development teams or were just more of our requirements?
The 1 hour, so the first 1 hour is mainly requested by the QA team.
The one is staging canary?
In all the environments except
Okay.
for production, including staging. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was like 1 hour to run that test, run the QA full suite test, and then basically I put in another hour for a proper baking time, in
Okay.
case anything goes wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Just on that thing, I was thinking, since we don't get extra traffic there that is not synthetic coming from QA testing, we are actually trying to see if we get any memory problems running, or do we plan to have any kind of other insights in this baking time period? And I'm asking you this because looking again at the rollout plan, we are ending up pretty late on America time
Yeah.
zone. And if something goes wrong during the production deployment, it's actually the last stage, then it's only Graham alone in APAC.
That is true. So basically, if I'm trying to understand this properly, you're thinking of reducing the bake time in basically staging canary and staging, correct?
I mean, to the point that we are still comfortable with it, right? So I was just asking if
Yeah.
these 2 hours were for a particular reason where we actually thinking that these could surface some issues or not. I understand that for sure, like non-functional requirements like memory footprint and something could go up with the time for whatever reason. So otherwise, I was thinking if we can eat some time somewhere and give more time to the production deployments. So if something goes wrong, we don't end up in APAC time zone with less coverage. That's it.
For sure. I was thinking about that as the total duration of the deploy ended up being 18 hours total. But as you said, right? Since staging canary and staging doesn't get actual traffic, we can probably reduce those down to 1 hour. And what's it called? Between each cluster in production, this one I'm a bit like I'm pretty uncertain about. Let me know what you guys think. How about like 30 minutes for bake time? So like between first zonal, second zonal, third zonal, like all this is going for 1 hour each. It might be a bit too extreme because we are baking in production in total for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, that
The-
sounds a little excessive.
It's a bit excessive. So I was wondering if we can reduce that down to maybe like if we can push it into each. So because we have 3 zonal clusters, how about like 20 minutes for each, trying to get that all rolled out in an hour. I don't know about regional cluster, like versus prefect versus Italy. Any thoughts? Has anyone seen something go terribly wrong where it happened after like 30 minutes?
Well, Giddily is running Golang instead of Ruby 3, so I don't know how impacted Giddily would be. Prefect would be the same situation.
Sorry, just to confirm, how impacted is it? Like, are you talking about like gradual degradation or?
Any impact realistically, but
Okay.
yeah, we could probably shrink down some of this time. Like, so the zonal clusters all run the same stuff. They're just
Yeah.
at a different zone, primarily for cost, right?
Mhm.
The regional cluster, that one runs all of Sidekick. So that one feels a little dicey to me. So if we're going to cut down the time, I would probably
Mhm.
avoid cutting down the time on our regional cluster just because Sidekick, and depending on the type or style of jobs, we may not detect all failure scenarios immediately just due to the nature of Sidekick itself. It's kind of one concern I have. But I would hope QA kind of, picks up a lot of that kind of stuff. But we could probably reduce the baking time between Giddily and Prefect and the started Kubernetes just because those are Golang applications, Giddily and Prefect. I don't know if there's going to be any changes specific to Ruby 3 for those 2 components.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to try and reduce that down because it actually goes all the way into like I plan to stay online until this deploy is done. And right now the deploy plan goes all the way until 9 p.m. my time. And if anything goes wrong, that's going until probably in the morning. So I don't want to see that happen. Right. So yeah, let's try to reduce that deploy time and see what happens.
We could also think about starting earlier.
Mm.
So maybe we could start in Graham's time because the starting part is even if something goes wrong, I mean, it's staging canary, so not a big problem.
Mm-hmm.
If we start earlier, in any case, will be still probably only Graham available to fix, right? And I'm not sure we will be able to all development or distribution or anyone for that. I mean, we could start earlier. Did you? I think Eugen, you checked out with Alessio, right? For since he was the release manager for that in that day.
Yeah, I will ask him, see if he can. Yeah, when's the earliest he
Okay.
could start on his day? Probably that would make sense.
Yeah, let's do something. Let's review the plan about the baking time and understand if we can shift something to not end up too late on America time zone to avoid that we spill over in APAC when we have less coverage. And review the plan maybe, I don't know, next week since we have another check-in.
Let's do that. Yep.
Perfect.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
So I usually start my day in the afternoon. So if needed, I can start in the morning on that day. So that's like 9 UTC is 2:30 p.m. for me. So it's UTC plus 5.5. So
okay,
we can use that as an option as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you for the availability on that. Good. Vladimir.
Yes,
Demo.
so that's going to be very short demo, I hope. so we have this this epic. You separate deployment for internal API for GitLab SSHD. It used to be like an issue, but we start looking into this, and it turned into like a pretty big epic actually. And the main goal of this epic is to avoid, well, kind of isolate the internal requests in one single service, which is like normal API service, but it runs in within a different endpoint. And GitLab shell, and well, we're focusing on GitLab shell for now, but eventually all APIs that goes to like /API/internal, theoretically they can be routed to this internal API, because there is no point to route them to public endpoint or route them to web service or something like that. So we will kind of isolate SLOs to this service, and we will not use any kind of external traffic at all. That's the idea. I don't know, maybe Skarbek has better description on this service now, but that's what my understanding is. Am I correct?
Yeah. So, when just a little history lesson here. When the GitLab shell service was being migrated over into Kubernetes, we did not yet move the API deployment. We only had the Git deployment. So naturally, we didn't have a way for the GitLab shell to talk to the API. So in order to get it talking to something to authenticate users when they hit the GitLab shell, we just pointed it to the Git service. We knew that this was not something we wanted to land on in the deep dark future. We knew this was something that we needed to change. So that's what the issue was here to address. Now that we have the API deployed, it was just something that never got prioritized and scheduled at this point in time. But now that we're doing this work, we can now, do exactly what you just mentioned.
All right. So this is the rollout plan. Deployment phase and observability phase is actually finished. The next steps would be to shifting the traffic. So we have on production and on, well, basically on every environment, we do have this web service internal API now. It doesn't serve any traffic for now, except health checks and readiness checks. And well, in order to understand the usage and understand like how much traffic we got, what is the latency, and etc. In order to like scale the service properly and adjust the requests and limits, we wanted to also have like normal observability for this. So now we do have this internal API dashboard. If you go to the dashboards and you click on internal API, there is this folder called internal API. And for now, it's only like one main dashboard, which looks exactly the same as like API dashboard or Git dashboard. And you can see these things here, like how it's looking and how it behaves. So, and obviously there is no traffic yet. There is a Kubernetes overview, and yeah, the next steps would be to start shifting the traffic and observe what's happening. This service doesn't run on regional cluster. No, there is regional and there is a zonal. It doesn't run on zonal cluster. It doesn't run on regional cluster because we don't have web services running on regional cluster. But I ideally, we talked to Steve and from reliability, and he said like ideally all internal requests should go to the service, but in order to make it working, we need to deploy Kubernetes agent and pages on zonal clusters. I was mixing this. Yeah, that's basically it. Nothing fancy. If you have any questions about the service, I would be happy to answer.
Have we validated that logging is going into our Elk stack yet?
That's a good point. Not yet. I will do that just right after the call.
Any other question? Nope. Then I'm gonna stop the record.